Our story begins, an introduction to human evolution. Human evolution is a really long and winding story, and really it's everyone's story. This big story tells us how our ancestors changed over millions of years. Let's remember, people weren't always like they are today. Our bodies went through big changes. Our minds, how we think and how we understand the world also changed a lot. This amazing journey of change started a long time ago on the continent of Africa. It's a super interesting story of surviving, adapting, and always changing, a story written in our DNA. We humans share common ancestors with lots of other animals living on Earth. Our closest relatives in the animal kingdom are the great apes. You can think of chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, but it's really important to understand this. We didn't evolve from the monkeys or apes we see today in zoos or in the wild. Instead, we share a common ancestor that lived millions of years ago. This common ancestor wasn't a modern human like us, and it wasn't a modern chimpanzee either. From this old starting point, different paths of evolution branched off. One of these paths eventually led to us, to what we call the scientific study of human evolution. Cleverly uses many different clues from the distant past. Paleontologists, who are scientists that study ancient life, carefully examine very old bones. These bones, which have turned to stone over thousands of years, are called fossils. Fossils give us super valuable information about our ancestors' bodies. They clearly show how the shape and job of our skeletons changed over long periods of time. Scientists also study old tools, usually made of stone, which show how our ancestors lived, what they ate, and how their intelligence grew. Genetics, which is the study of genes and how things are passed down, also plays a really big part in understanding where we came from. Our DNA, the molecule of life, holds a detailed history book of our deep past. Today, scientists can carefully compare the DNA of modern groups of people from all over the world. They can also compare human DNA with the DNA of other primates like chimpanzees to see what's similar and what's different. Sometimes with a lot of skill and a bit of luck, they can even get DNA from ancient human fossils and study it. This genetic information helps build our complicated family tree and points out the key genetic changes that make us who we are. First steps, the first hominins and their world. Millions of years ago, our story of evolution took a really big turn in Africa. The first human-like beings who started to walk a different path are known by scientists as hominins. One of the earliest and most important changes in the hominin family was learning to walk on 2 feet. This just means that instead of walking on 4 legs like most mammals, they usually walked on 2 feet. Why did our distant ancestors start walking upright like this? Maybe it gave them a better view over the tall grasses of the African savannas. Or maybe it was a way to use energy better for traveling long distances. This change also freed up their hands for new jobs. Among the famous early hominins, we find species like Australopithecus. Lucy is a very well-known fossil skeleton from the Australopithecus afarensis species. She lived more than 3 million years ago in East Africa. Lucy and others like her were important because they definitely walked upright on 2 feet, but their brains were still quite small, not much bigger than a modern chimpanzee's brain. They were creatures adapting to a world that was also changing. Thick forests were slowly shrinking and open grasslands or savannas were spreading across the land, bringing new challenges. After the different types of Australopithecus, other groups of hominins slowly appeared on the evolution stage. Our own group, called Homo, first showed up in the fossil records about 2.5 million years ago. The first members of this group, like Homo habilis, which means handy man, had brains that were noticeably bigger than the ones before them. They are also known as the first hominins to consistently make and use simple stone tools. This invention was a really big step. Making tools showed new ways of thinking and solving problems, and it let them prepare food much better than before. The world where these early hominins lived and evolved was not still at all. It was always changing. Africa's weather went through many big changes over millions of years. Other parts of the world were having big ice ages, and this affected Africa's weather too. In a roundabout way, these changes in the environment pushed hominin groups to always adapt or face dying out. They had to find new food sources. To deal with new hunters and changing lands, they had to come up with new plans. This tough pressure from the environment helped the most skilled and adaptable ones, and it was like a strong engine driving their journey of evolution. Shaped by change, genes, environment, and adaptation. Evolution, at its most basic, happens because of changes in our genes. Genes are like super detailed instruction books for building and running a living body. Sometimes, when these genes are copied from one generation to the next, small, random changes happen. Scientists call these mutations. Most of these random mutations aren't actually very helpful to the living thing. Some mutations can even be pretty harmful. But every now and then, a mutation can give a living thing a little bit of an edge. This edge might help that creature survive better where it lives, or it could help it have more babies than others. The environment then kind of acts like a filter, deciding which new traits are helpful and which ones aren't. This whole process is famously known as natural selection. For example, if the weather in an area gets way colder over time, individuals born with genes for thicker fur or better fat storage might have an easier time surviving the cold, so they're more likely to live long enough to have babies and pass those helpful genes on to their kids. Over many, many generations, natural selection can lead to really big changes in what a group of living things is like. It shapes them to be a good fit for where they live. What they ate was a super important part of their world, and it really shaped how humans evolved. Early hominins probably ate mostly plants, things like fruits, nuts, and roots. Some might have also eaten meat from animals they found that were already dead. But as hominin brains started getting bigger, they needed a whole lot more energy to keep them going. Meat is packed with energy and important nutrients. Later on, developing regular hunting and, this is a big one, controlling fire for cooking, totally changed what our ancestors ate. Cooked food is much easier to digest and gives more calories. This likely helped our big, energy-hungry brains to evolve. Gap 2S. Living together in groups also played a really big part in shaping how we evolved. Over time, hominins became more and more social creatures. Living together in groups offered big advantages, like better protection from dangerous predators. Group living also helped with finding and sharing food, and with taking care of the young, vulnerable kids. Cooperating within the group became super important for survival. Being able to communicate well with others, learn from what group members knew, and form strong social connections gave them a big evolutionary advantage. This growing social complexity likely drove the evolution of our unique ability to use language and our highly developed brains. The journey to us and beyond. It's pretty amazing to think that for a big part of prehistory, many different human-like kinds walked the earth at the same time. For a very long time, our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, were definitely not alone in the world. For example, other kinds like Homo erectus had spread out of Africa long before us and settled in parts of Asia. The well-known Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, lived in Europe and parts of Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They were strongly built and were well suited to survive in cold weather. More recently, scientists discovered another group, the Denisovans, mostly through genetic clues from a few small fossils found in Siberia. Our own kind, Homo sapiens, which means wise human, first appeared on the continent of Africa about 300,000 years ago. For a good while after we showed up, we were just one of several humankinds living together on the planet. So what made us special in the end? What allowed us to do well while the others disappeared? Maybe it was something unique about our brains. It might not have been just the size of our brains, but more importantly, how they were built and connected. We developed complex language, which allowed us to share detailed information. We could think about ideas, create shared stories like myths, and work together in big groups in all sorts of ways. Then, about 70,000 years ago, something changed, and Homo sapiens started to spread out of Africa in a new, more successful wave. This time, we were different somehow, more capable. We successfully spread to almost the entire planet. Our ancestors reached Australia, settled Europe and Asia, and finally made it to the Americas. It seems that almost everywhere we went, the other humankinds already living there eventually disappeared from the fossil record. Did we compete with them for things like food and places to live? Did we fight with them? Or maybe did we mix with them? The genetic proof we have now strongly shows that there was indeed some mixing with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and so here we are today. Homo sapiens, the only humankind left on planet Earth. Our journey of change from ancient ape-like ancestors to who we are today has been truly amazing and full of challenges. But it's very important to remember that evolution hasn't stopped for us. We are still changing, maybe in ways that are not always easy to see. Our world is changing super fast, mostly because of our actions and new technology. What will humans be like far in the future? Will our fast-moving technology start to guide our own changes in new ways? These are big questions, and the story of human evolution is still being written.